It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, my colleague in the danger zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Not feeling particularly dangerous, but we'll get through.
Do you ever feel dangerous?
No,
If you were a colour, you'd probably
never.
be eggshell. Do you know what I mean? Beige. You don't strike me as someone who lives on the edge.
I think I'd be like light beige.
Light beige, yeah. It's probably a... Describe yourself in a colour. Light beige. Wouldn't be shocking pink with fluorescent yellow stripes, would it?
God, no. Absolutely not.
Enough of that. This week, a couple of classic weird worlds, including continuation of the animal revolution. And we have some NFL news, some big news. Former MVP signs, a amazing coach passes away, and we finally get rid of preseason games. And then, Neil, we're gonna have the privilege of speaking to the Podfather, at Fancy_Mansion, Lord of the Road to Underworld, Matt Kelly. Who's going to talk us through what he's been doing in lockdown, and we're going to all talk bravely about Baker Mayfield and why that hasn't worked out as much as it did what we thought it would, and what Matt specifically thought it was before he was even drafted.
Looking forward to that.
Should be good. Should be good. Firstly, Neil, let's get on with some weird world. First story is old person swears, not really news. Oh, by the way, they're dead. Okay. Ghost hunters are probing report of a potty-mouthed ghoul. I love that UK phraseology for our American listeners. Potty-mouthed, swearing at tourists at a beauty spot. The angry apparition is said to be a woman in white. They're either like a woman in white or a woman in black, right? That's your standard ghost. Who tells people to fuck off in an area known as Dead Woman's Ditch, aptly named. Christine and Dave Thomas are investigating the site named after the murder of Jane Walford by her husband John in 1789 in Somerset. The couple say they picked up on a voice which told them to fuck off. They also claim to have encountered a murderer from 1798. Dave said, "My wife has experienced it for a long time." Neil, where do you stand on ghosts?
Sure she has. Well, I'm always of the opinion that, I want to believe in that maybe there is something else. There's another level, as it were. However, as I've got older, I have become more cynical and more in need of proof. I'm not certain that old women, when they were murdered way back in the day, would pick up phrases, the vernacular, like the F word. So I can't say for certain that they would happen. And it strikes me as a little bit odd, and something that maybe there's just some fella hanging around this area waiting for people to walk past so he can shout at them. As if I thought people had heard a rumour, apparently there's an old woman who haunts this place, I need to wreck your head.
Yeah,
I really need to get in there and cause a ruckus.
I think I'm with you there, Neil, in terms of the idea that, they came to see Somerset, probably, don't live there. I've visited the staying in a lovely bed and breakfast, I'm sure. And Doris has told her mate, who's told her mate's daughter, who's then decided to wind the F up by shouting in an old woman voice, "Fuck off." Pure comedy gold. Where do I stand on ghosts? Believe it when I see it, but I'll be frank, I don't like horror movies. I don't go on ghost trains, so maybe I do believe them because I refuse to go on those things because I'm a scaredy cat.
I mean, when it says it's in an old woman's voice, I mean, in my head, it's Terry Jones.
Well, yeah, obviously.
So obviously a comedy legend who has left us this year, but boy, did that man like dressing up as a woman.
The Monty Python crew were never afraid to put on a dress.
Absolutely not.
Neil, let's continue Weird World, and let's continue with the animal revolution. The cannibal rats are coming. This story from the Guardian. Lockdown has been hard for rodents whose fortunes are tied to those of humans.
Thoughts and prayers.
Just facts, Neil. When restaurants closed and city streets and back alleys emptied of people in their waste, rats lost a plentiful supply of food. So they followed us home, foraging and breathing in our gardens, drains and household voids. They became more brazen and aggressive, and when that wasn't enough, they began to eat each other. Cannibal rats are among the grimiest consequences of the upending of urban life. In the US, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have warned us of unusual or aggressive behaviour in rats, including the eating of rat pups. Neil, talk me through cannibal rats.
Well, I, for one, welcome our new rodent overlords, and hope they will be benevolent rulers over all of us. Rats are, as we said, vermin, and if they're going to start eating each other, then I think that's technically it's actually a threat to employment, which we don't need. Environmental health officers, they need work as well, and they can't be having this market force closing in on them and taking away a steady stream of employment. Generally, rats are, I've seen domesticated rats, and they're very nice and very cuddly, I'm sure, but rats as a concept are foul. And if they're going to eat each other, well, that's fine. Just do it somewhere away from me. That would be lovely. Right.
I mean, I guess you can say rats eating each other, but that sounds like politics in most countries at the moment. As long as the rats are eating each other, I'm going to be okay with it. I think my major issue is when the rats decide to move on from eating each other to, us. I'm not going to be down with that.
Yeah,
that's a no from me.
I'm on board with. Yeah, that's no. Come on.
That's a no from me.
Let's not do this.
Neil, a weird world, as always. If you've got a classic story you want to share, please share them with us at waxing_lyrical, or individually. Neil is at n13 and I am at mainsy7. But that's it for Weird World. Let's get on with the NFL news. I guess the biggest headline news is Cam Newton. He signed for the New England Patriots. I assume to be the starter.
Come on.
I would hope so. I'm sure there's a lot of Stidham season wannabes who think that he's better than a former NFL MVP. I'm going to say he isn't, but there you go. I think I've got 3 questions for you, Neil, on this. So, overarching thing is, what's the NFL impact of Cam Newton being the New England Patriots quarterback?
Well, the NFL's fun if Cam Newton's in it. He has been one of the more unique players since he came into the league in 2011. He's, dynamic playmaker, almost, the prototype for the modern NFL quarterback. So from a viewing point of view, it's good news. He's in the league. That's fine. For the AFC East, that window where the Bills were the runaway favourites has closed. Although that may suit them, because we don't know how they would cope with being the ones being shot at. But what, most importantly, it does tell us is that, certainly by looking at the contract, is that Cam Newton wants to win. And this was a discussion we had, I think, earlier this off-season, where maybe we could have been forgiven for thinking he'll follow the money. But when the money dried up, could he sit out a season, maybe really preserve his health? Because he's making the NFL equivalent of absolute buttons, but he's going to play for a team that... Now, I made this point earlier today. If you asked 31 other franchises, you can swap your offense or your offensive skill position players for the Patriots right now, would you? I don't think too many would. So it's now going to be a question of, okay, we've seen that Josh McDaniels has worked wonders with Tom Brady, Adam Gase, Peyton Manning. How good can he be at tailoring an offense to Cam Newton? Because I'm sorry, if you want to tell me that Jared Stidham is going to be the starting quarterback, I'm not listening. I'm really not listening.
I think from an NFL point of view, I think there's a lot of teams who drop the ball. We can get into it. A Black Lives Matter debate on the situation. I'm sure a load of teams will hide behind the fact that they got their mediocre, substandard quarterbacks because, you know, they knew they were healthy, so therefore could sign them to, you know, multi-million-dollar contracts. That's a cool story in that. Cam Newton's a former NFL MVP, and the last time he was fit, which was what, a year and a half ago, which is an issue. He was fantastic. I mean, the elephant in the room that no one will talk about or wants to talk about is that if Cam Newton's fit, he's a better quarterback than Tom Brady was last year. And the Patriots won, 12 games last year?
I think it was 11.
11, so they're technically better now. Like, no one will want to talk about it because, you know, Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback ever. I don't think that's disputable. However, what is disputable is he was any good last year. So, you know, they've still got a really good defense. They still haven't really got any playmakers to assist Cam. But they've got Cam, and I think that could be a big thing. I'm with you on the Bills. I think Bills stock may be being sold right now. That doesn't mean they won't be good. I don't think this impacts them necessarily in a wins and losses point of view. It may affect them in 2 wins and losses against the Patriots, but I still think they will be a good team, probably, and a playoff team again. But whether they win the East at a canter, I don't see that being the case anymore at all. I think it's a really good decision, and it's why stuff like this really annoys me, because there's a load of stupid teams and teams who do things stupidly for no other reason than, I guess, fan culture, while the Patriots just win more games again.
The one good thing is that can finally be we can finally, I think, put to bed. I would never entertain it anyway, but we can put to bed the idea that Belichick was going to tank. Because I didn't believe it, but some people, he'll tank so they can get Lawrence. Bollocks. I'm sorry, no. This is not a move of a team. If you wanted to do that, you'd have signed Blaine Gabbert. Or, you know, you'd say, no, we're comfortable with Brian Hoyer. This is not a move of a coach who is content with getting his first chance to coach this team without Tom Brady. Going to say, do you know what, we'll lose a year. That's fine.
Where do you stand on how this looks for from a fantasy impact point of view? Where's Cam, and does it improve anybody?
It's hard to say. Cam Newton's MVP season, you look at the receivers he had that year, they were not great. I mean, we had, you know, Fozzie Whitaker and Philly Brown and people like that. It wasn't great. He had Greg Olsen. He had a good running game, and of course he was an excellent runner himself. We don't know, and we don't know. I say that, you know, with a certain degree of certainty. We do not know how healthy he is and how much he's going to be comfortable running as much as he did in his pomp. Now, obviously, I know he's not the most accurate passer in the world. He's never going to be the most accurate passer in the world. He was running the Norv Turner offense well before his shoulder went, and he was still running. Once he stopped running, we lose that. You know, we lose the magic of Cam Newton from a fantasy point of view. It's, as I say, I don't think it's going to change too many people on that offense. I think let's assume now that they've looked at it and said, we're going to be a run team. We're going to be a run first team. Well, that's great. You've got a quarterback who can help with that. So if Sony Michel is healthy, it's good for him. If it's not him, then maybe they turn it to Damian Harris. Rex Burkhead's still going to have bits and pieces role. The usual thing to do with Patriots running backs in the past has been take the cheapest one in fantasy drafts. I suspect that this year that will be Damian Harris. They've got 2 rookie tight ends. We know how hard it is for tight ends to make an impact. You could say, if you want to play that causality argument, well, Cam likes throwing at tight ends. Yes, he likes throwing at borderline Hall of Fame tight ends.
I'm going to say it. He likes throwing at Greg Olsen. Do you know what I mean? So do most quarterbacks.
Yeah, Julian Edelman has never been a big touchdown scorer. Is he likely to lead them in receptions, targets, yards? Yeah. So I don't think it means automatically, Julian Edelman now, he's a wide receiver 1. No, take him where he was going. I think it's a move that will make the Patriots better in the real world.
Yeah.
But I don't know about fantasy. I'm not going to say that Cam Newton is going to be a top 3 or 4 quarterback in fantasy. He may have weeks, especially if he does still get goal line carries.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to say, don't take Mahomes, don't take Lamar Jackson, don't take Dak Prescott, just get Cam. There are a lot more people I'm a lot more comfortable taking before Cam Newton.
Next story, Neil, is a sad one, unfortunately. Joe Bugel, former offensive line coach for the Washington Redskins and head coach for the Phoenix Cardinals and the Oakland Raiders, just teams that randomly change their names every now and again, died this week. Sad news. I guess we come to everyone's favourite part of the show, which is, history time from Mainz. Bugel coached under Joe Gibbs, 81 to 89, so was part of 2 Super Bowl winning teams. They won 3 Super Bowls, but the 2 that they won with Joe Theismann and Doug Williams, neither of which you would say are Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks. What they won with was a run game and an offensive line, and that offensive line was affectionately known as the Hogs, and that was christened by Joe Bugel. It was coined in training camp in 1982 when he told Russ Grimm, a Hall of Famer, and Jeff Bostic, "Okay, you Hogs, let's get running down there." So that became a thing, a massive thing, and to be honest, is probably the most famous thing of the Joe Gibbs era. Not individual players, or you could argue Darryl Green, maybe Art Monk, but it's that group of offensive linemen. His head coaching record was frankly awful. He was 24 and 56. He came 5th in the NFC East 3 times. You knew there was 5 teams. Most people wouldn't even know there was 5 teams in the NFC East, and I don't know if anyone's got a map of America, but Phoenix definitely is an East. A wonderful offensive line coach. Really nice man, by all accounts. Will be missed, and sad times for the Washington franchise in relation to that.
Joe Gibbs came from San Diego, where he coached under Don Coryell. Don Coryell, obviously, as we know, was the architect of the modern passing game, or at least one of them. We can say Sid Gilman, then Don Coryell, Bill Walsh, people like that who incorporated their own systems. So the thinking would have been that Gibbs will come into Washington and he'll bring some of that Don Coryell offense with him. So, he's going to fill the air with footballs. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't. The system was in place. But the twists that Gibbs made was he basically had the Coryell scheme and he bolted a power running game onto it. And he was able to effectively bolt this power running game onto it because of Joe Bugel and the Hogs. So you can disagree with me if you want, but I don't think you will. Washington don't win any of those Super Bowls without Joe Bugel.
Yeah, I don't think you could possibly deny that. It's as I said, they won it with rushing and defense. That's how they won back then. That's how the NFC East was. And they, the Hogs are the main part of that in the offensive line. So yeah, it's just one of them things. Here we go. Next story, Neil, is the end of 4 preseason games. Sources tell us that, given where we are in terms of COVID-19 and the like, that there will only be 2 preseason games this season. Given we are very close to a new collective bargaining agreement and talk of additional regular season games, I assume this could be the end of the 4-week preseason.
God, I hope so. It used to be all right because you'd see your first game, you'd see the starters for a series, maybe 2. Second game, you might see them for most of the first quarter, Third game, you'd see them pretty much the whole way through, and fourth game, you wouldn't see them. Now, you don't see them. A lot of coaches and people like, Sean McVay, who is clearly a better head coach than Doug Peterson, so I don't know why anyone's bothered arguing with that. It's clear. I don't know why we're arguing with this. The fact that Doug Peterson has beaten Sean McVay 3 times and has won a Super Bowl, whereas McVay crapped the bed in his Super Bowl, but I digress.
I've missed the Philadelphia story there.
CBS have done one of their polls and said, the top 10 coaches, and McVay was 5 and Doug Peterson was 9. You're wrong, but anyway.
Okay.
Sean McVay was one of those when he first came into the Rams. He literally just didn't play his starters at all in pre-season. So I think it was. Excuse me. I think if we go back to a line from the second Bengals Hard Knocks, where they're talking about a player, and he was saying, this player's not going to make the team in the pre-season games. He's going to make it by what he does at practice. He's going to make it in the film room. And I think that's what's going to have to be in this situation. We've got COVID and whatnot. So you only have 2 games. We've seen, even with 2 games, the first couple of weeks of the NFL season is generally a bit sloppy, and certainly has been since 2011 when that CBA came in. I think with 2 games, again, coaches aren't going to play the starters for all of them if they can avoid it. So I think that it's just going to be... I remain fearful that we will not get a full season. I think it'll start, but I think something will bring it to a close.
Neil, at the moment, it seems in many situations that college football has gone for the herd immunity approach to this. Get them all together, get them all to go to parties, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm not even kidding. The NBA, like the Premier League and the Bundesliga were doing thousands of tests and getting 1 or 2 positives. The NBA did their tests, and out of 200 players, 25 tested positive. And then they did 800 staff, and I think 40 of them tested positive. This is not going well.
No.
This is somewhere in theory that the NBA believe they could have a bubble. The NFL does not believe it can have a bubble. So good luck. Especially why, if you go on the internet, people have declared war on wearing a mask. Because it breaks their human rights or something. I don't know. Just trying to save lives of people.
Yeah. Do you know what the biggest impingement on your human rights is?
Death.
Dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally is a death thing.
The thing that worries me, and I can't remember which player it was. It's going to really bug me. An NFL player who's asthmatic. And he said he's not comfortable playing, nor as an asthma sufferer. I am technically a vulnerable person. Should anything kick off, and I be around it, and I get it, I'm at risk. Well, NFL players are, as we've seen, they're not normal shapes and sizes. So, you're putting an awful lot of strain on your immune system anyway. If you're asthmatic and then you get this disease that affects your breathing, I'm not comfortable with a situation where we could ask ourselves, well, how many more have to die? I don't want any of them to die. But, there's money to be made.
Well, this is it. I think final story before we get to the great Matt Kelly is all about Washington again. Yes, everybody, you're welcome. Reports came out today that investment firms and shareholders worth a collective $620 billion have asked Nike, FedEx, and PepsiCo to terminate their business relationships with the Washington Redskins unless the team agrees to change its name, according to a report in Adweek. This comes hot on the heels of a story that officials in Washington have said that they will not even contemplate allowing Washington to build a new stadium on the site of the old RFK Stadium unless they change the name. If this was a fight you've lost, accept you've lost, move on, get a new name.
We always said that, as we know, money talks in the NFL. Well, now we do have a situation where, fans not going. I'm not being funny. I've seen the last few games the Philadelphia Eagles have played in Washington. The Eagles fans just buy the tickets, so that's not hurting Daniel Snyder. The stadium being empty would hurt Daniel Snyder. Sponsors saying we don't want to be giving you money, that will hurt Daniel Snyder. This all comes down to one man, and forgive me, but I still believe he is pig ignorant enough to not be listening. But if he is, and I'm sure he's an avid listener to this podcast and really, really respects my opinions, change the goddamn name. Enough already. I personally, I may have said it occasionally, but since about 2013, when I first started writing about the NFL, I have not used the word in any of my articles. I don't use it. I know websites that I write for don't use it. And there have been editors who have taken it out of articles we've written. We're past it. It's done. Get over it. Change the goddamn name.
I don't really understand what the position is that you could take right now to defend the name. Like, without you sounding like I'm racist. Sorry, let me rephrase. There is obviously multiple ways in which you can defend the name because people defend the indefensible all the time. But that just makes you a racist. It's okay to say when you were a child or when the name was invented, it wasn't seen as racist. It was racist. It just wasn't seen as racist because, everyone was racist. Now it's not an acceptable name. The Washington basketball team are called the Wizards. Do you know what they used to be called, Neil? The Bullets. They used to be called the Bullets. That name was seen to be offensive, so it was changed. Change the name. The thing I don't get is, at the moment, there's a load of people with Washington merchandise who support Washington. If you change the name, those people will also buy new merchandise with the new name.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to like it, Mr. Snyder, but what you have to do is accept it. You're on the wrong side. And also, I know and you know, that shithole you built in Landover that no one wants to go to is going to be empty for a long time. If you want it to be full, you could move it to Washington. If you want to do that, change the flipping name.
It's come around full circle because obviously when RFK was being built, because it's on federally owned land, George Preston Marshall, who's a prick who we talked about, I think it was last week.
Previous racist prick.
Yeah, he was told, you're not building on that land until you segregate your players. So when he drafted Ernie Davis, and that came in, it's just come around full circle. It's, no one wants to come to this shithole. I need to build a new stadium for it. By the way, you'll know this as well. FedEx Field is 20 years old, and already you need a new stadium. Unbelievable. But, okay, we need to go back to Washington. Where's good? Well, there's RFK Stadium.
Yeah, exactly. You have no real leg to stand on. In the world we live in right now, how Roger Goodell hasn't made them do it already is unbelievable to me. Because they won't just stop sponsoring Washington. They will call Roger up and say, get him to change the name or get a new drinks manufacturer. Get him to change the name or get a new, postal service delivery company. Do you know what I mean? Just get over it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like it, but you're wrong. So change it, accept it, and move on.
The big problem, of course, is that Roger Goodell works for Dan Snyder, not the other way around.
Yeah, but there's 31 other owners whose money he could possibly be affecting by this move.
Mm.
There's a reason. There's multiple reasons why David Tepper is the owner of the Carolina Panthers. One of those reasons is everyone decided that Jerry Richardson being in charge was bad for business. So I understand that if they had a pissing contest on who's got the most money, Dan comes probably second behind Jerry. But if 31 owners all ganged up on the richest guy or second richest guy, he'd change because he'd have to.
So that's it. When you say, if you say Roger Goodell, tell him to change it. No, not Roger Goodell. Get Jerry Jones to tell him to change it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Roger Goodell will do it because Jerry Jones tells him to, because Stan Kroenke tells him to, because David Tepper tells him to, because Robert Kraft tells him to, because all those people, their bottom line is being affected by Daniel Snyder decisions. So, no, Dan. No chance. Tony Dungy has said on NBC Sports, on the most popular TV show in America, on a weekly basis, that he refused to say the name. Tony Dungy, not a small man, one of the leading lights in the NFL. And he's decided to say that. And what's Dan doing? Smoking a cigar? Like, what are you doing? Wake up. Just wake up. Sell the team. Change the name. Rant over. Rant over. On that note, Neil, let's stop this being a twosome and let's get the Podfather on the phone to chat to him about how his lockdown has been going and talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical, we have the Podfather, I quote unquote,
wokest
the wokest
motherfucker
out here, bro. The Lord of Roto Underworld, Mr. Matt Kelly. Matt, how are we?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I was just on the Wayback Machine, waybackmachine.org. You ever been on this site?
No. What's this?
Mm-hmm.
Waybackmachine.org allows you to go back in time on the internet to see old versions of websites.
Ooh.
So if you wanted to see what a website looked like, Barstool Sports, for example, you can go see Barstool Sports from 2015, and you'll see not much has changed. Yep, still super misogynist assholes, and the least common denominator sports content available. And if you go to the Wayback Machine for Player Profiler, you'll see that the Washington franchise was called just Washington, going all the way back to 2015. You're welcome. You're welcome. That's leadership. That's leadership, assholes. That's what leadership looks like. That's the wokest motherfucker out here, whoever's running that site. Oh, that's me.
Matt, what a start. What a start. I don't really know where to go, but I'm going to start with, we haven't spoken to you in a long time, and since then, basically the world's decided to close to end, and we locked everyone down. How has lockdown happened for you?
Dealt with before, actually, just all happened to come in 1 year.
Yeah. How has lockdown been, especially with a young family?
I'm the same. I'm just tired of it. I'm over it. I'm so over it. I don't think it's a big deal anymore. I am obviously practicing social distancing and obviously wearing a mask because I'm not an idiot. And I have regard for my fellow humans. And I don't want there to be a surge in infections in Connecticut, one of the few states that's continuing its decline. So we actually did flatten the curve and kept it flat in Connecticut, and we don't plan to let it go back up. Thank you very much. But I have worked from my house for many, many years since I started Player Profiler 5 years ago. So not a lot has changed. I've never commuted to New York, for example. So that part of it hasn't changed. And we were very fortunate that we moved into a house where I could have a dedicated studio space just before this all happened. So great timing by me. As I'm very fortunate that we had the right setup here for sort of a comfortable quarantine. If we had a small, one of those houses that you see, there's these shows now, Tiny House Nation. Imagine if you were in a tiny house, 400 square feet. They have families that live in 400 square feet on purpose. They go from a normal size house to like a little shed on purpose. Like that's a thing people do. And now in lockdown where mom and dad are no longer working and everyone's in the house 24/7, now they're not so happy about their tiny fucking house. Just showing off. Like, we don't need all this space. Like, that's just a show-off move. Moving to a tiny house. Fuck out of here, man.
See, you worked from home for a while, mate. I never have. Yeah. Never. But in the last, 2 months, I have been working from home. And honestly, it's the greatest thing I've ever known.
It's so great. It's so great. And you don't think it's possible, but you are more productive. You're absolutely more productive because you can better control your focus. You can get into flow state more easily without so many distractions. It is good to be able to go into an office at least once a week for brainstorm sessions and idea sharing. It's a very important thing to get on the whiteboard with your colleagues. That's something I think you should be doing at least once a week if you're in a company environment, and it's possible to do that. But every day in an office is just not it.
Yeah, I could work in an office, but I choose not to most of the time. I'm 1,000,000% with once a week is far too much, more than enough. You don't need to. And, as you said, I believe I am infinitely more productive at home than I ever was in an office.
Once a week, a commute on the train, it's nice. It's nice. It's not a grind, right? You can go to a lunch spot you like in the city. It's great. It's great. Once a week is great. But I've had to do it, many, many years ago. I was expected to go into the office every single day, every 5 days a week, every single day. And then before we had high-speed internet in residential communities and the internet was much better in the office, sometimes I would actually go in on the weekends. Oh!
Obviously, Matt, since, obviously the main stories of the last few weeks has been, training camp not happening, off pre-season getting shortened, but there has been some actual on-field NFL news. Now, in the past, obviously, you've been a Patriots fan. You're not a Bill Belichick fan so much anymore, but in the last few days, they've signed Cam Newton. Now, assuming he overcomes the insuperable barrier that is Jarrett Stidham, I'm just curious to know which team do you think will look stupidest for allowing Cam Newton to sign for New England? Will it be the Bears, the Jaguars, the Chargers, or will it be the Panthers?
None of the above. Who signed Chase Daniel to 4 times the amount that Cam Newton's going to be making? You got to look up the Chase Daniel contract. Is he in Detroit now?
I think he is.
You look up the Chase Daniel contract. He signed 3 years, $13 million with the Detroit Lions. $13 million for Chase Daniel. That's embarrassing. And you have a quarterback coming off a major back injury, and you're in win now mode. You're in save your job mode. So that was a major fuck up by Detroit not adding Cam Newton. And then Patricia watches his former boss get it, but he has to just slap his forehead. We spent all this money on Chase Daniel. Why? Why would you give Chase Daniel $5 million guaranteed? He's not helping you win. He's helping you lose. Why would you do that? This is the weirdest thing. I can't even believe it.
He's the ninth highest paid player on the Detroit Lions roster right now.
It doesn't make any sense. They're idiots.
He's never going to play. And he's the 9th highest paid player on the team.
we gotta let Darius Slay go so we can get our hands on Chase Daniel. Like, this is how bad franchises stay bad. And I'm very excited for Cam Newton in New England. I think that he is instantly, without a doubt, the best quarterback in the division. And I keep hearing that it's not true. It's actually Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen's the best. Are you kidding me? Josh Allen is like a young Cam Newton. So why would you want Cam Newton when you can have a young version of Cam Newton in Josh Allen? And I just want to stab myself in the eye with a pencil as if they're even close to comparable. Josh Allen had one season with 9 rushing touchdowns, and that makes him Cam Newton? No. None of his other metrics are anything close to Cam Newton. Cam Newton's worst season as a thrower was much more accurate than Josh Allen was in his best season as a thrower. Cam Newton is better in every way at the sport of football than Josh Allen. But Josh Allen had that 9-touchdown season, over 500 rushing yards, right? And there's room for improvement, right? I love the arbitrary pegging players to best case scenario. Like, somehow Josh Allen is the guy that's being pegged to best case scenario. He's going to keep the rushing production as if, okay, it's not going to happen. He's not going to rush for that many yards. He's not going to rush for that many touchdowns. Fuck out of here. And then, but he's going to improve in the passing game because, in year 3, he's going to do this big year 3 leap. He didn't make a leap at all last year. All his advanced completion percentage metrics remained flat, right? Pressured completion percentage outside the top 30. Red zone outside the top 40. Deep ball outside the top 30. Even clean pocket completion percentage outside the top 30. So it doesn't matter where he is on the field, what situation he's in. He's not throwing it accurately. Oh, well, what about the drop passes? Okay, 1.4 drop passes per game. That doesn't tell the story, okay? And on playerprofiler.com, we have the Bills with fewer drop passes than other services like Pro Football Focus. Why is that? Because have you seen some of these passes that were classified as drops? They're not that catchable. Because Josh Allen doesn't throw a catchable football. He's throwing lasers 5 yards down the field above the guy's head. And yes, he happened to get both hands on the football. Just because a guy can get both fingers on a football doesn't mean it's catchable. Doesn't mean you call it a drop. You try to catch that. Fuck out of here. Has no feel for the game. Zero touch. And bad accuracy, both in the pocket and on the move. And this is a guy that you're drafting as your QB1, especially in best ball leagues where you don't have access to a waiver wire. Like, you got to be good with him because, you're going to have another quarterback. If you're in best ball, you're going to draft at least 2, but you better draft 3. And unfortunately, Allen is going before these super stable quarterbacks that actually have higher ceilings. Brady and Matt Ryan have higher floors and higher ceilings than Josh Allen because this idea that he's going to become this productive passer with prolific rushing is fiction. We've never seen it. Maybe if we saw it at the college level, maybe that could be in his range of outcomes. We haven't seen it. It's never happened.
I think the incredible thing for me, I mean, I know obviously Buffalo are, at their core, they are team established the run, but in 2 years, Josh Allen has never cleared 270 yards passing in a single game. So that doesn't help.
Terrible. He's terrible at this thing we call throwing the football. Even Cam Newton eventually washed out as a less than average passer with great rushing ability. Like, even he couldn't make it to age 31 without getting released. Now make it Josh Allen, who is a fraction of the athlete that Cam Newton is without the accuracy that Cam Newton. Cam Newton was at least moderately accurate. In his last full season in the NFL, Cam Newton was number 1 in some completion percentage metrics. I mean, he was number 1 in play action pass completion percentage. Did you know that? I mean, that's impressive. People are like, really? Yeah. He was top 5 in red zone completion percentage, top 5 in true completion percentage, top 5 in completion percentage under pressure. Josh Allen will never come close to being top 5 in multiple advanced completion percentage metrics. I don't care what type of hands his receivers have. Get Stephon Diggs, get all the best hands receivers in the NFL. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Is this an issue? This is not totally off topic, but this is a major issue for Buffalo, right? Because they believe they are good, and in theory, they are 10-win max.
The fans are fooled. 95% of that fan base is totally delusional about their chances at a championship this year and beyond because they have Josh Allen, and it's impossible. It's an albatross around the franchise's neck, and they have no idea that it's an albatross. They think it's like this diamond necklace, and it's actually this dead bird rotting, and they have no idea. They're completely oblivious to how bad he is. Like, they didn't invest in the quarterback position other than Jake Fromm, right? If I were the Buffalo front office, I would have been angling for a quarterback, both in free agency and maybe Cam Newton. I mean, that would have been a great signing because then you have the same offense. Something happens to Josh Allen, which it's going to happen, by the way. You put yourself in harm's way and exposed to huge hits the way Josh Allen does. Look at Cam Newton's injury history. Shoulder sprain, midfoot sprain, concussion, transverse process fracture in his back. Right? Remember that? Fractured ribs, ankle sprains, wrists. I mean, it's just crazy. And that's just, I would think, best case scenario, given how much punishment he endured. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, even more frequently injured and more serious than that. The way he sort of is this skyscraper that's sliding around out there just getting absolutely blown to smithereens by opposing linebackers. Josh Allen's going to have one of these huge hits where he breaks a rib, breaks a back, breaks a shoulder, something. It's going to happen soon. So for all these reasons, I don't understand why he's selected as early as he is in draft master formats where you cannot go to the waiver wire. He's a fun player to take a chance on and see if maybe he improves as a passer and continues to be a prolific rusher. If that happens, then that is a top 5 upside. I think it's highly, highly unlikely, but at least you can take a chance. And then if it doesn't happen, you pivot to someone else in week 1 or in week 2, week 3, whatever, whenever you've decided that it's not going to happen, if it doesn't happen. But you don't have that luxury in best ball. So I don't get it. I don't get it. I would actually rather, in a best ball league where I just want maximum stability and I want to make sure that I'm getting points every week from my quarterback position, especially if there's less than 20 roster spots, then you just want 2 quarterbacks. I mean, Josh Allen is a complete stay away unless you can get 3 quarterbacks. So I would rather have Teddy Bridgewater because Teddy Bridgewater has this volume, this pass volume ceiling that would offset the rush volume ceiling of Josh Allen. But I think Teddy Bridgewater is a much more stable player. Like, I think I'm convinced that he's on the other side of that spectrum where Josh Allen is erratic. Teddy Bridgewater has pinpoint accuracy. Like, he is top 5 in a lot of advanced completion percentage metrics, was last year. So now give him those weapons in Carolina where you have the best yak receivers in the NFL. And then you also have Curtis Samuel. You also have Robbie Anderson. So they're stretching the field horizontally. They're stretching the field vertically. They're accumulating all these yards after the catch. And now make that quarterback pinpoint accurate, especially in the short and intermediate quadrant. Whoa, right? Like, it's like, wow, this is all fitting so perfectly where he's going way over 4,000 yards passing, way over. Like 4,500 yards passing with 30-plus touchdowns is so easy for me to see for Teddy Bridgewater, especially in that division with the worst defense and facing Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan most weeks, like great weather conditions. And it's just so perfect.
You heard it first. 4,530 is a number. Sticking with fantasy, Matt. Renewed importance on a stud running back in early rounds of fantasy drafts, plus the opening upper passing games. The question is, the zero running back strategy, is it on life support? Is it dead?
It just depends on where you're drafting. If you're drafting in the back half of a draft, now it's essentially dead in high stakes leagues. So you need to know this. If you're in a high stakes league, it's over, especially in best ball, because in best ball, you can't go to the waiver wire and take advantage of the late season emerging running backs. You can't go and get DeAndre Washington for the last couple weeks of the season. That is a critical component of any zero RB strategy, that you're going to be aggressively pursuing breakout running backs on the waiver wire. As soon as the running back goes down, you're going to the waiver wire. You're going to try to get that guy. You're going to devote all your auction, your fab auction budget to making up for your big weakness at running back. You're saying, I'm going to go into this draft. I'm going to be weak at running back. I'm going to be super strong elsewhere. Great. Okay. Well, if you don't have access to the waiver wire, then that strategy is a non-starter, because then you're just drafting these late round guys like Darrington Evans, like Benny Snell, that have no role. Then you're just playing the lottery, the injury lottery. That's all you're doing. And that has a very low hit rate. Hitting on multiple guys that get injured and then they emerge as primary backs and potential league winners is just, it's such an insane strategy, because it's such a low probability play to go that direction at running back when you don't have access to the waiver wire. We have access to the waiver wire. It opens up a lot of possibilities at running back, and it makes zero RB a lot more feasible. So that's why you see high stakes best ball leagues, there is no such thing as zero running back. No one would ever do it, because actual money is on the line. These aren't fantasy writers that are trying to come up with some clever article, write about their draft and get some clicks. These are people with real money at stake. And the idea that they're going to forego running back is just like crazy. They would never do that. It's actual real money. And then the idea that it's best ball makes it even less likely. So in high stakes FFPC leagues that are traditional leagues with waiver wire fab bidding, you see the occasional zero RB roster. But again, because it's high stakes, these guys aren't going to do that, right? They're not trying to come up with some clever article. They're actually trying to win. So very few in traditional high stakes leagues, none in high stakes best ball leagues. And then as leagues get more casual, it becomes more feasible and reasonable. There are particular situations where it makes sense. I could even see myself doing it in high stakes if things line up just right. So if I'm in a high stakes league, Michael Thomas is going to be drafted in the back half of the first round. Devontae Adams sometimes can even leak into the second round, because again, it's insane not to draft running backs, right? So if you do find yourself in a situation where maybe you're at the turn, you're at the 12-13 turn, maybe you could double tap Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, right? And then maybe you could go Allen Robinson or DJ Moore. If you're in a running back heavy draft and you can get 3 top 10 wide receivers, then it can make sense. Then you could actually see yourself going, hey, I'm going to go start wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. And that would make sense. But you're also hoping that maybe a Leonard Fournette falls to you, a Todd Gurley, a Melvin Gordon falls to you at the end of the third round. That may or may not happen. You hope it does, but it's a huge gamble, right? Yeah. So that's why the turn is so challenging. If you're at the 12 pick you decide to go wide receiver, right? Just because you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna take the wide receivers, and I'm gonna force people to make harder decisions. Do I go Godwin over a running back? You're hoping that one of these guys that can operate as a true bell cow with at least an improved offense, like in Denver, makes it to you at the end of the third round. And as the stakes get lower, those running backs are more often available, where the Melvin Gordons and the Gurleys and the Fournettes are going to be available at the end of the third, early fourth round, whereas they're long gone in high-stakes leagues. So, yes, in certain situations, you're drafting in the back half of the first round in a more casual league. I think it makes sense. I think it can work. But it's challenging, and it's a gamble. You could be sitting there, and David Johnson's gone. All these guys you don't even like. It's like it's heartbreaking when running backs you don't even fucking like are gone. Like, that's the situation you find yourself in. And I've talked to the best high-stakes players about this, like Chad Schroeder. I said, well, what do you do when there's a run on a position? Do you take that as an opportunity to zig and get out of the way of that position and let others send value your way at another position? He's like, no, you get in, you get that guy before they're all gone. What are you, crazy? And I was like, but you're taking him a couple slots ahead of his ADP. He's like, so? You have to go with the flow with these drafts. Otherwise you can zig your way all the way out of a position and all the way out of contention. Oh, you got great value on this other position. Great. And now what?
You talk there, obviously, Matt, about the high stakes when it comes to actually making money. We've seen in the last couple of years some of the top fantasy writers around the likes of Evan Silver, Joe Dolan, Brad Evans. They've gone off and they've started their own websites, like Establish the Run, Fantasy Point, Fade the Noise. It used to be obviously in the past where we could just all go to Roto World or Fantasy Guru and read all their stuff. Do you think that in the last couple of years, fantasy experts, and these are obviously, people like Silver, obviously, as you know, you speak to them all the time, these are the best, are they beginning to realize their true value in the game, about the game?
Well, they just have enough experience, and they have developed a bankroll where now it's possible. So when you first get started in your first 5 or 10 years of professional life, most people don't have a trust fund. Most people don't have $50,000 in the bank that they can go and then invest and build a website like I did or like Evan did or someone else. But once you've, worked and grinded it out I just didn't happen to start my career in sports media. I started at a web development agency and later at a web design company, which then I applied some of those learnings to the website Player Profiler. But either way, it took me time to develop a nest egg that I could then go off on my own with. And it's just, you look at the timeline of when fantasy football really started to pop, it's been 10 to 20 years. And it takes some time for people to get to a position where they can go build something. So it makes sense. It makes sense that Brad's now making the leap. It makes sense that Evan's making the leap. These guys are still pretty young because they started in sports media right out of college. I happened to start before them because I had already, created a baseline that I could then take and launch a website from. Both having the funds to go and invest, but also knowing people in the industry, knowing web developers and designers, and being able to talk about what my vision was in a way that others could go and execute. All that takes time. So I just think that I don't think there's an aha moment or anything that's happening in the industry. I just think it's a little bit of a coincidence that a lot of the really good writers are now in a position where they can go off on their own. I think it's just time and place. So it's great. It's a great thing. they were severely underpaid for many, many years, a lot of them. And, if you're Evan Silva and you have 20 or 200,000 Twitter followers, well, you can go negotiate with Roto World and say, hey, listen, I have a huge reach and I bring a lot of equity to this brand. Okay, right? Then we can, then you're not getting any kind of baseline salary. You're getting, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to leave if you've already negotiated a generous compensation package. But eventually, no compensation package a company offers you can be as attractive as the upside of a breakout website, right? So there's much more value in creating a breakout website than taking a salary, even a very generous salary. And eventually, you reach that friction point and you go off on your own. I think it's a natural thing that's been happening in a lot of industries. And a lot of people are now just more comfortable paying for content. The idea that you would pay for fantasy content 5 years ago was not really something that most would consider, wasn't palatable. But especially with DFS, with the advent of DFS, you had some fantasy gamers making a lot of money, right? So the DFS is more popular, high stakes leagues are more popular, so there's more money to be made, and there's more people that have a lot invested in the sport that they're more than willing to pay, $85 a year for Player Profiler's all-in package, for example. So you have that going on as well. So the force is kind of aligning where now there's enough money in the space, enough people with money, and their sensibilities have changed where, okay, I need to make money. I need to pay for an optimizer to be better at DFS. I'm going to go ahead and pay for that. Okay, now we've broken the seal. Now I'm starting to pay for fantasy content. It's much easier to go subscribe to the next website now that I've made that leap. But DFS really was the big one, bringing a lot of money into the space where it really was sort of a very a low revenue and is sort of just an afterthought, low revenue enterprise for a lot of places. And that's why there wasn't a huge investment by, Yahoo, ESPN. We'll do a free game. We'll get people on our website. We have ads on our website. It'll pay for it. Whatever. Right? Now, especially now that DraftKings is public and they're worth many billions of dollars, everyone in the world now, even that's not a fan of fantasy football, is starting to wake up and go, oh, there's real money to be made here. And now, Evan and others have a platform where they can put their content out and get paid for that content on demand. Everything should be on demand, right? Everything, you should pay for everything on demand, right? That's the world. So the idea that now it's much easier to pay for things online and pay for content online. Also, there's a platform called Stripe, which was a big game changer. They're actually still a private company, but they totally revolutionized the whole payment card system and paying for subscriptions online by making it a lot easier for websites to accept credit cards. Now there's just a couple lines of code that you can add to a website to start taking credit cards. Whereas before, you had to set up this whole relationship with a bank behind the scenes, and it was many months of work to set up e-commerce on a website. And we use Stripe. I know a lot of others use Stripe, and it was a complete game changer when Stripe came along. It really opened the door for a lot of people to make real money on their content and to charge for it without this huge barrier to entry to actually run an e-commerce site. So a lot of things have sort of fallen into place.
I think one thing that I've noticed, I've dabbled with my variously, low level of talent for about 7 years. But when I first started writing about fantasy, I was talking to people and they said fantasy is a great way to get into writing about the game as a whole. Whereas now it just seems that an awful lot of people just want to write about fantasy. I mean, because I can't go away and write about X and O's because I can't watch film. I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. But fantasy, I think I know what I'm talking about to an extent. And I think a lot more people, I'm not saying it's that they're happy that I'll write about fantasy and that's it. But there's not so much of I'll just write about fantasy until I can do something else.
Well, fantasy football now, especially with virtual gaming being a big driver, everyone's quarantined. Any kind of virtual gaming is going to be accruing a lot of value, right? So whether you're in fantasy sports or you're connected to fantasy in some way, assuming these games actually start happening, then the proxies for those games, like fantasy sports, the potential is going to be huge. Like this season could be absolutely enormous because you have all these people at home, and the virtual gaming space is exploding because everyone's at home. And that's what fantasy football is. It's like virtual gaming. So this is a big year for any fantasy football content creator. I think I'm very bullish on this season. I think that it could be, especially as basketball delays its start, baseball delays its start, negotiating with the unions. The start of the football season has never been delayed, and it's never been in question. So the advantage these other sports have been or had, as MMA certainly and golf, but major sport, to be the first major sport to really launch with fanfare. Like the clock is ticking on these non-football sports to make it happen. Otherwise, football is going to steal everything.
In January 2018, Matt, we had you on the podcast. I know it was a long time ago. We talked draft, and you extolled the virtues of Mr. Baker Mayfield, massive advocate at the time. He had a really down year last year, given a multitude of different reasons. Do you think he'll bounce back this year, given the new situation he's in?
Yeah, it's like the anti-Josh Allen, right? It's the opposite. They both have really strong arms, right? But Baker Mayfield's best comparable to Drew Brees. And Baker Mayfield was actually betrayed by his supporting cast. He had more drops last year by his receivers than Josh Allen did. And he was a lot more accurate than Josh Allen. And he was super accurate under pressure, 40% completion percentage under pressure. But it wasn't a great season. He had the most difficult schedule by far and away. The schedule that the Cleveland Browns faced last year was absolutely devastating. Look at the teams they had to face. It was Tennessee, Jets, Rams, Baltimore, 49ers, Seahawks, Patriots, Broncos, Bills. It's so difficult. It was crazy, right? It was just crazy. The start to it was the most difficult first 10 games you could ever lay out. And yet he still had these weeks where he had over 17 fantasy points 3 or 4 times, or 15 fantasy points a couple times. So he was able to manage, but the problem was once they got into games against lesser defenses, the team switched over into a run-heavy approach. So you're playing Cincinnati, they're just going to grind out clock. Big deal, right? So you're playing Miami, they're going to grind clock. But what happened when they did play Miami? He threw for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he was top 5 quarterback in fantasy football that week. That was the only week that he was a top 5 quarterback. Just happened to be in a situation where they were going against a soft secondary against a team that was scoring some points and forcing him to throw 34 times, right? As opposed to 2 weeks later, they play Cincinnati, he only throws the ball 24 times. So the schedule betrayed him last year. He had to develop rapport with a new, alpha wide receiver. He lost David Njoku. And it just makes sense. It just makes sense that you put a second-year quarterback in a situation where he's facing the most difficult second in the league every single week, that he's going to struggle. It's the most obvious thing I've ever seen. So he's an incredible post-hype sleeper, especially in Dynasty. I want all the Baker Mayfield. He was one of the most prolific quarterbacks in college football history. Right? He's right there with Patrick Mahomes and Andrew Luck and Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow, right? In terms of one of the best seasons ever in college football. He's amazing. Like, if you zoom out, he's been nothing but great. Even his first year, he was impressive. He wasn't great, but he was impressive given he was a rookie quarterback, right? He also that year had a top 10 deep ball completion percentage. So one year he has a top 10 deep ball completion percentage. The next year he's top 10 in pressured completion percentage. Shit. Right? This guy is performing in difficult situations, and he's throwing the ball accurately deep, which is the most important thing when you're measuring accuracy. So I'm very bullish on Mayfield. In seasonal leagues, I'm not necessarily targeting him because I do believe that this is going to be a Kirk Cousins situation where he goes from, well over 500 attempts to being throttled down and maybe even going under 500 attempts with much better efficiency, I'm sure. But Kevin Stefanski's the new offensive coordinator. They upgraded the offensive line and Jack Conklin and Jarek Wills. So they have two. I mean, they go from having two of the weakest tackles to two of the best right off the boom. So the running game greatly improved. The running backs are the two best running backs, the best running back duo in the league. I mean, can you think of a better running back duo than Chubb and Hunt? With the offensive coordinator that unlocked Dalvin Cook last year. So Kevin Stefanski wants to run the ball. They're set up to run the ball. They added a tight end in free agency so they could implement two tight end sets. They even added Harrison Bryant, the former Mackey Award winner from Florida Atlantic, one of the best tight ends in the draft. So they could go ahead and trade Njoku now, and they may even have a better run blocker in Bryant than they did in Njoku. So either way, you can see the moves they're making, it's all about running the ball. And I think that they can be successful because, like in Minnesota, where you had Thielen and Diggs able to get open on their own because they're great route runners, same is true with Landry and Beckham. So if you have exceptional talents at wide receiver, specifically receivers that can get open on their own, then you can more easily run 12 personnel, because if you don't have that third receiver, it's more difficult to run pick plays and rub routes. So you really you sometimes have to put those two wide receivers out on islands on respective sides of the field and ask them to get open on their own. Well, Cleveland is uniquely positioned to be able to do that. So I think this is going to be a very efficient year for Mayfield. I just don't see the volume, but I think he's going to be successful, and I think he's going to accrue value in Dynasty.
I like the idea on this, as Matt extols the virtues of trading David Njoku. My phone beeps, and it highlights the fact that Drew Rosenhaus and David Njoku have asked the Cleveland Browns for a trade, literally while we're on the phone.
Of course.
Breaking
of course
news.
It's going to happen. Listen, we did not have a mascot listed for the Washington team as early as 2015. So we are here to deliver tomorrow's newspaper.
We talk about, say, Matt, that you're not necessarily targeting Baker Mayfield in redraft leagues. That brings me on to the world-famous draft kit, obviously, that we put out at Player Profiler. Given the advances to the kit, the information that's been put out, and the big names that contributed to it, do you think and agree with me that this is the best one yet?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I thought last year's was good. The year before that was very good because Ben Gretsch did all the draft kit team previews, and those were excellent. This year, I was much more heavily involved in the team insights, writing the team insights. So I've, either written or rewritten or enhanced every single one of the team insights. And I'm constantly tweeting information from these team insights because there's so many trends that you see from one year to the next. Like we talked about with Baker Mayfield. Like, it's interesting that this team is devoting all their resources to running the ball, whether it's coaching, whether it's draft picks, whether it's free agent ads, everything. And you can't ignore that because we saw the same signal coming out of Minnesota last year. And what happened? Kirk Cousins never threw the ball. So you can't ignore that kind of stuff. It's important. But it's also important to take in context. It didn't really hurt Kirk Cousins' dynasty value, but it did make him unusable in seasonal leagues. And, the last one I just did was, speaking of Washington, looking at Terry McLaurin. Woof, right? Terry McLaurin had an excellent year. And when Dwayne Haskins came into the game and became the starter, even though they had great rapport, because Haskins was so bad, McLaurin couldn't be as productive. But that doesn't mean the rapport goes away. He still has the same shower narrative with Haskins that he had last year. He's been working with Haskins for many years. No other wide receiver in Washington has that luxury. And Washington does not have a satellite back anymore. Chris Thompson's gone. Their new satellite back is Antonio Gibson, and he's still a rookie, so we don't even know what role he's going to have. Maybe Bryce Love is a better receiver than he showed at Stanford. I don't know. Who's the starting tight end? Jeremy Sprinkle. Who's the second wide receiver? No one knows. Is it Kelvin Harmon? Is it Steven Sims? I don't fucking know. It's probably Steven Sims. Either way, it signals that this is the Terry McLaurin show and that he's an incredible value. And it's why zero RB just isn't optimal. Because you look at the running backs that are available when you can get McLaurin, there's no question you would rather have McLaurin. Just look in any given round, what would you rather have? The best receiver in that round or the best running back in that round? Well, in most of the rounds after round 4, I would rather have the wide receiver. It just so happens that in the first few rounds, I'd rather have the running back, which incentivizes a robust RB strategy over a zero RB strategy. Because then you can get the best running backs. You can get your Miles Sanders. You can get your Alvin Kamara. And you can also get a Terry McLaurin, who's a full-blown number one on a team that's going to have to throw the ball to be competitive. You look at their schedule. Look who they have to face. Teams with quality offenses and bad defenses in their division. The Eagles have one of the worst secondaries in the league. Arizona Cardinals is a friendly defense. The Giants, the Cowboys, they lost their number one corner in Byron Jones. You face the Giants again. You face the Detroit Lions without Darius Slay, right? So on and on and on down the list, right? It's a schedule that's a dream schedule where you're either in a shootout with the Cowboys, right, or you're facing the Bengals, and their signature vulnerability is the secondary, just like the Eagles. You could be in a shootout with the Eagles, whose signature vulnerability is the secondary. So what do you think is going to happen? They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And who's going to command those targets? It's going to be McLaurin. And I think that Haskins is going to take a step forward, but he can't not. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than what he did last year. But I think that there were some money throws last year, especially under pressure, that Dwayne Haskins executed, which gave you a glimmer of hope that this guy can put it together as a pocket passer in the NFL. So I'm very hopeful for him, and especially McLaurin. So I think Sims is the number 2 because Sims commanded a lot of targets when he was on the field. His hog rate was top 5 in the NFL, and that's targets per snap. Whereas Kelvin Harmon was outside the top 80. So Kelvin Harmon was running a lot of empty calorie routes. And meanwhile, Steven Sims was a target hog and targeted constantly when he was on the field. So one guy's a target magnet, the other guy's a decoy. I'll go with the target magnet. So I'm looking for McLaurin. I'm looking for Sims in fantasy drafts. And if you start to find these situations where, I really like McLaurin. I really like Christian Kirk. I really like Michael Gallup. Right? So you like these guys. What rounds these guys going in? McLaurin's going in the 5th round, and Gallup's going in the 7th round, and Kirk's going in the 9th round. It's like, okay, well, if I like all these, well, when am I going to get my running backs? Right? Well, you get them early. So why would I go 0 RB and invest in all these receivers early and then have to forego McLaurin and forego Kirk and forego Gallup to get a running back that's not even a primary option? That's a fringe guy or a guy that hasn't been good in years. Because those are the guys that are available when a Michael Gallup or a Christian Kirk are on the board.
Final question, Matt. Important question. Podcast lives at stake. Are we going to have a season this season?
Yeah, I told you guys we're going to have a season. Come on, you guys got to be able to pivot your show sheet and improvise. No, I already told you earlier. It's like you weren't listening to the show.
No. You highlighted.
We're definitely going to have a season, and the only question is whether the other sports will. Do you believe? Will circumvent the NFL and actually launch first and take some of the fanfare away from the NFL by being the first major sport and having, the red, white, and blue and being able to, have the crowd chanting USA. There's no crowd, but people at home, take advantage of the groundswell of support for sports, the pent up demand. One of these sports is going to get the advantage of having first shot at absorbing all that pent up demand, and it could be the NFL because the NFL is going to happen.
So on that though? So they're saying that the NBA and MLB are late July, but you're suggesting that you think there's a possibility the preseason games in August are going to take place before those games take place in July.
I'm just saying they're starting to cut it close. All I'm saying is the other sports starting to cut it close, and now what's happening is they're creating these bubbles. And then players in these bubbles are starting to come down with COVID, and they're shutting it down. I'm just saying we don't know. I'm just saying they should have already started. Yeah. When did Germany's soccer league launch?
3 weeks ago.
Mid-May. It's finished.
Mid-May.
They finished.
Right. We should have had baseball in mid-May.
Yeah, but baseball's was a money conversation, right? Though
sports have this incredible opportunity to tap into this pent-up demand, and they're going to let the NFL eat their lunch. I can already see it. Happening. It's already happened. They've already foregone a lot of benefit and a lot of revenue over the last few weeks, and it's gonna because they're poor at executing and they're pushing it back. Now, the NFL is also, I think, super misguided in that they just believe the season's going to happen through force of will. You don't hear the NFL creating a bubble scenario where multiple teams will play games in a particular game site with no fans. The NFL keeps moving forward with a status quo, business as usual attitude, which precludes them from thinking outside the box and thinking creatively when things don't go their way. When mass gatherings are not allowed in a couple months because some states are rolling back their reopening schedules, then what? We'll apply for an exception. What happens if you don't get an exception? Right? Who's to say that a governor is going to grant you that exception to have fans? No, it's probably not going to happen. Now what? We were planning on fans the whole time. Well, okay, that's just arrogance. That's just hubris. The NFL would have told us by now if they had a plan B for the season, and they haven't yet. So I think there's going to be some scrambling at some point, but through force of will and because the players' union is much weaker, it's going to happen.
And we can't wait to have it and listen to you talk about it and the fantasy stuff related to it. Matt, as always, an absolute pleasure, and we will speak again soon. Neil, that was the brilliant Matt Kelly there. Just light him up and let him go. And 52 minutes later, he'll stop talking. What people don't realise, he spoke 20 minutes before and 20 minutes after as well. I tried to start the show 10 times and I couldn't start it.
As I say, there's just some people who we get them on because we want to hear them talk. There's, Matt, there's Mr. Dagnall. These are people that we want to hear their views. We don't want to sit here on the Skype looking at them, smiling at us, saying nothing.
Absolutely brilliant stuff from Matt, and even attacked us for trying to stick to a script. There you go.
You.
Well, he attacked me. It was your script, though. And also, he kind of only half suggested that it was still going to be open. I wanted an actual yes or no, but here we go. We asked him about player profiler and the world famous draft kit, and he spent 20 minutes talking about Washington and their wide receivers. There you go. Neil, where can people catch you this week? Because this is now officially the longest show ever.
Excellent. Find me on the Twitter at ndutton13. I've not done an awful lot this week. Done a couple of pieces on Ravenswire. There is a piece I did actually do for Rotoviz about why I'm fading Adam Thielen in fantasy football this year. So you can find that over at rotoviz.com. Other than that, follow me on Twitter for absolute guff.
Follow me at Mandy7. I am doing a preview in the next few weeks related to the AFC East for the touchdown. Absolutely going to rewrite it now based on what Matt said on Josh Allen. There we go, because it needs to happen. I'd also already done the Patriots, and that has to change as well. I am at Mandy7. Together we are at waxing_lyrical. You know what? It's been a long one, so these top guys are out.